Hey guys, welcome back to another edition of Building a Family Business podcast here on Builder Funnel Radio. As always, I'm joined with Wes and Brooks. How are you guys doing today, Wes?
Hey, I'm doing great, thanks.
I'm
Brooks,
doing great also. Yeah, great. Another beautiful day.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one. What are you guys reading these days? Brooks?
I am reading interesting book here, The Religion Virus by Craig James. So very interesting. It just talks about how religions have evolved. And this guy's theory is kind of the survival of the fittest. So as religions have evolved into the few religions we have today from multiple religions across the world. So super interesting. Yep.
Wow, that does sound interesting.
Yeah.
So survival of the fittest, meaning just whichever religions maybe marketed their word better and
That's kind of his theory. So he'll go from all these different religions throughout, time, going back 4,000 or 5,000 years, and how the different religions were, adapted and became more popular to the religions that survive today. So it's just an interesting way to look at it. So I'm finding it interesting.
Yeah,
cool.
That's cool.
How far into it are you?
About halfway into it. I mean, it kind of, tips you on your head a little bit, the theory, depending on how you were raised. So it's an interesting book to plow through because you're always going back and forth thinking, oh, okay. It's making me think a little harder than I usually do.
Might have to set that one down for a little bit.
I have. I've set it down twice.
That was in 5 minutes.
Yeah. How about you, Wes? What do you?
Well, right now I just started a new book last night. I just ran across it on my Kindle. It's called "Can't Hurt Me: Master Your Mind and Defy the Odds," and it's by a guy named David Goggins.
Oh yeah.
And have you heard of him before?
Yeah. I follow him on Instagram. I haven't picked up the book yet and read it.
Okay.
But yeah,
well, he had a pretty
hardcore.
horrific childhood. I mean, I'm just kind of going through and reading about his childhood right now. It's just terrible, just awful. And so I think the premise of the book is kind of, hey, we're only using 40% of our capacity, and he's going to show that. So I kind of looked him up on Wikipedia. He holds the world record for most pull-ups in an hour, which is over 4,000 pull-ups an hour. It took him 3 or 4 attempts over, 3 or 4 years to do it.
Wow.
One time he blew out a wrist, and one time, so pretty interesting. I'm looking forward to getting into it. I think he's going to show us or talk about how, man, we can push ourselves a lot further than we ever think that we can. So anyway, and I'm still grinding through Charles Koch's book on Good Profit. So still working on that, slowing down a little bit on that. We're getting into some heavy duty stuff. So it's kind of like the Brooks's book. I'm reading some and I'm setting it down, and then I go read something else and then come back to it. So that's what
I prefer to read a book all the way through, but I find that whereas I used to be able to do that easier, I'm finding that more challenging. And so I'm not quite sure why that is, but for me, if I can read it all the way through, I get more out of it versus picking it up, setting down. So I struggle with that because I'm like, oh yeah, this book's kind of heavy. I'll read something a little lighter. And
do you guys highlight or underline or do anything like that in your books or not?
Well, I usually put some ink on my forehead so when I fall asleep reading it, I just. No, I don't. That's an interesting idea. Would be to highlight or.
Well, I find that I do that in my Kindle. I used to do it in my books. I just, underline and write in them and stuff like that. And that kind of helped me keep me engaged if the book was one that was a little heavier, So, maybe I should star that or underline that.
Do you underline on your Kindle then?
Yeah, you can. Sure. You have a Kindle?
Technology breakthrough for Brooks.
Yeah. So just hold your finger down hold your finger down on the word of one of the word in the sentence that you want to highlight, and then it will kind of highlight that, and then you can drag the ends of it to highlight the entire sentence or paragraph where you want it. And then I think you can actually pull up everything you've highlighted and just read the highlighted sections after you're done with the book.
Yeah, that's a nice feature. And it's weird because I do the highlighting on Kindle, but then when I do a physical book, I just dog ear pages. And that's kind of an interesting one because then usually I forget which part of that page. I'm like, oh,
Oh.
it could have been this part, or it could have been this part. Those are
All
both
very
kind of
good
interesting.
stuff.
Yeah, it's all good stuff.
Well, I figured it's my book, so that's why I just started writing in them.
Yeah.
I'm
curious though, because I tend to be in the middle of a few books at once. But Brooks, you said that you used to just read one all the way through. But how do you guys absorb books and get through them? Are you in the middle of, you try to stick to one or two, or is it just you're all over the board? Everyone kind of does a little.
Well, I try to just stick to one, and then I might have one around more work stuff, and I might have one more just around more pleasure reading, which might be educational in some way, in some fashion. And then, if I'm on vacation, then I'm just reading, murder mysteries, and I'll just plow through 7 or 8 on a week or something like that.
Nice.
That's cool. I was thinking about that. I guess I have been bouncing around more, and I think what I do now is I read until I find myself starting to drift. And then if I'm drifting and I'm not really getting everything that I was getting out of the book, when I was reading earlier, then I'll stop and I'll just go to something else. Because what I find is that it'll maintain my interest for about half a book, and then I start to drift a little bit. And so if I want to keep that interest all the way through, I have to go read something else and then come back to it and pick it up again. And I just find that helps me a little bit in that regard.
Yeah. I find that I definitely have book ADD. I'll start one and then, oh, that one looks good. Oh, that one looks good, and just pick them up.
There's so much content out there that's coming out every day. It's hard to consume. You try to decide what you're going to consume.
And there's a lot of crap, I mean, I don't know how many leadership books there are out there, but about 9 kabillion leadership books or business books or management books. So it's really hard to figure out what the best ones are.
Yeah. Well, and that was a perfect segue into our topic today. Yeah, nicely done, Wes. Yeah. So, today we wanted to dig into leadership, but not just leadership in general and kind of how it applies in the family business setting. But I guess just to kind of kick things off, Wes, as you think about leadership, how has your, how did you develop your style, or when did you even just first start thinking about leadership in the business setting? Because I feel like a lot of times you just get into business and you just start
doing your thing, right?
You're just doing your thing, and you don't necessarily think about that leadership element.
Right. And I've read a lot of books on leadership probably later, in my business career. I would have to say that my style developed into pretty much kind of leadership and management by walking around. So my idea of leadership, certainly in my last business, is, hey, I wanted to make sure I was always the first guy in. So, coffee had to be made by 6 or 6:30 in the morning before the first shift showed up. So I'd always get in there and do that. And then as people came in, I always wanted to make sure I was saying hi, finding out a little bit about how they were feeling that day. And so by the time you work your way through 30 people or so, you've kind of killed a little bit of time just as you go around and talk to them at whatever their workstations are. Whether that was a good style or not, I don't know. It worked for me and my personality. And I think that's part of it. I don't think there's any particular style that's best. I think it really has to fit with your own personality and what works for you. Some people are super rah. They're like, hey, everything is just over the top, and other people are just leading by example. And to me, I think that's probably all I've tried to do, is just lead by example. Just be there first, be there last, try to be kind, try not to yell at people, try, even when you're stressed out as the leader of the business, never take it out on your employees, try to be collaborative, bring other people into the picture and discuss about how to solve a problem. Was that the best way? I don't know. It worked okay for me.
I think one of the things about leadership in looking more retrospectively is, especially in small businesses, like everyone is in, or they're managing, maybe even managing a division. So they have a section they're working on, or a business they're working on, is being introspective and learning about leadership and learning about leadership styles. That's one of my biggest mistakes, was in starting out. I didn't really know about leadership, and had to be self-taught, and that just it takes a lot of time to do that. So the quicker you can understand different leadership styles, the quicker you can learn about them. Even if you have to learn about them just on your own, but as quickly as you can do that and practice being the best leader you can be, that's going to be helpful. And it's going to be helpful for your employees, helpful for if you have kids or you have a spouse, it's just going to be helpful. You'll just be a better person by being a better leader.
Yeah.
The quicker you can get to that, I think is the best.
Hey, Brooks, one of the things that when you said the word style, just reminded me, I think we've all done the DISC profiles, personality profiling, and I found that to be really helpful when I first, I guess it'd be about 97 or 98 was the first time that we used DISC profiles in the business. And yeah, I had no idea. I really had no idea that there was different personality styles or different styles of working and receiving information and interacting with others. So, DISC, if you haven't done it, I would think that's a really a great one to work with. The other one is Myers-Briggs. But for me, that kind of opened up, it made me change my style when I worked with particular people. So if I was working with somebody who I knew they were very conscientious and very list oriented, and they were very concerned about getting everything right, then I couldn't run in my normal style, which would be, hey, just throw something on their desk, say, hey, do you mind taking care of that? And I'll talk to you tomorrow about it. And bang, out the door, because that would be the wrong thing to do, because they really struggle with that, right? It'd freak them out. And I did have one lady that worked for me who was probably off the charts, a C, which in DISC profile means very conscientious, wanted to make sure everything was perfect all the time. And so she needed a lot of reassurance, because she would come and say, did I get that right? I saw that was wrong. Was that because of me? Did I do something wrong? And so you had to be very patient and kind of work through that with her every single time and recognize that's not going to change. You can't just say, hey, your work's great. Just keep going. That's awesome. You're doing a great job. Just keep going. I got to go. It's not going to work with someone like that. So it does help you modify your styles, I guess.
Yeah. And I think I don't remember who asked me the question, but it was early on, maybe a couple of years into starting the business, and they asked me, what is your leadership style? And I didn't know, like leadership style, what, but that question I think is a good one to think about, if you haven't thought about that question, or even if you have, just kind of revisiting that question periodically and going, what is my leadership style? What do I try to do? And that really helped me. I started digging into some different leadership books and, picked up a few, and then you kind of draw on those and go, oh, I like that element, or that resonates with me, or that kind of fits with my personality or unique style. And some things you're like, oh, I could never do that. And so maybe you don't start with some of those ideas and concepts, but I know that really helped me just start to formulate what I thought my leadership style was. And then it continues to evolve, but that question really helped. And I want to dive into a question here that I think comes up with leadership today with millennials, because there's kind of this stereotype that a lot of millennials are entitled. And so, as we think about either like kids coming into the business or just kind of a younger workforce, I don't know, what do you guys think about that? And have you found it to be true? And maybe Brooks, we'll kick off with you.
The interesting thing, I in prep for the call today, millennials are anywhere from 24 years old to 39 years old right now. I mean,
it's a huge range.
Yeah, it's a huge range. And I think, this broad brushstroke that the media uses about the millennials being entitled is just BS, because it's like anything where you just make this broad generalization. And there are so many hardworking people that are within that bandwidth of age, that age bracket, that's just not even true. I think we've made, like anything, we make caricatures and, make fun of like, oh, this millennial's entitled or something like that. And there's a few people like that in every generation. that doesn't really matter. But I think, the age group, the age cohort, I mean, I'm just thinking about the kids I know, the people I know who are in that age cohort, nephews and nieces in that cohort. They're just hard work. They're just as hard working as anybody else, if not harder working. And they've had some bigger challenges, just like people who grew up in the Depression of 1930. Those are hardworking people. People who came of age in 2008, 2009. They had some serious challenges that economically that they're not going to forget, and they worked hard to dig their way out. I mean, there's whiners in every generation.
Yeah,
and it's not specific to to the millennial generation. I don't know what to say.
Well, no, I totally agree with that, Brooks. I mean, you have to kind of ask yourself, well, how much does your age define you? I mean, really, you think of all the things that define you as a person. How much of that is just your age? So just because I'm 60 doesn't mean I'm going to act a particular way or anything else. So I think all the other things define how someone's going to act. What was their upbringing? What's their code of ethics? What types of jobs they had in the past? All those types of things. What's their family experience? What part of the country did they grow up? I mean, you could go on and on and on and on. All the things that form that one unique individual. And I think as leaders, we can be in a lot of danger if we start dumping people into buckets. And so if we just dump people into buckets, then we're not really going to deal with that person as one unique individual. And that's, I think, what you really have to do as a leader, is deal with people as each person is their own. I mean, do you want to be treated as someone who's part of a bucket? I mean, Spencer, you're a millennial, right? So
yeah, I'm right in the middle of that range. I didn't know the exact range, Brooks.
Yeah, so I don't know. Would you say if you read a description of a typical millennial in the newspaper or something, of course you wouldn't read that in the newspaper. But
what is a newspaper?
He's heard of these
this
things
thing you call the newspaper, yeah.
Is that what the dinosaurs used to read, or?
Yeah. So I mean, would you go, oh, okay, well, yeah, I'm definitely entitled, and yeah, I'm definitely, I mean, I just don't think it applies.
Yeah, and I think to your point, Brooks, like you said, there's whiners in every generation. You certainly see, like, usually stereotypes come about because there's some truth, but it could be even whatever percentage, whether it's 1% or 10 or 20, it doesn't really matter. There's usually some element of truth, but then that just gets blown up and just, standardized. But I guess kind of back to the heart of the question, I think you get this interesting dynamic with a family business when you have a kid coming into the business, and suddenly, like, the truth of it is they may be afforded an opportunity that maybe other people aren't because they are family. Absolutely. So I'm curious, Brooks, how do you handle that scenario with other employees, but then also with the kids, so that they don't develop a little bit of sense of that entitlement because they are given that opportunity? They probably didn't have to interview, stuff like that. So how do you think we should approach that?
I think you approach it from, you start early on. So it depends on where a person is in their business evolution and where the age of their kids.
Sure.
Because if you're starting your business and your kids are 5, you got a little bit more runway to think about what you might want to do with your kids. But let's say you started your business and it's actually very successful and you need resources and you have kids who are 16 or 18, or you have a nephew or niece who are 16 or 18, and you're like, that's a hardworking person, like to get them over in the business, and you're hiring more for work ethic, and like, oh, I think they're smart, and they may not have the skills.
Sure. Or trust, maybe.
Yeah, you might trust them, or you're like, well, would they be committed to the business? It's then thinking and being very thoughtful and thinking about what are the steps you would want to do to train that person to come into the business. And they just have the added benefit of being a family member. So you may think about that and think, well, if they're this age, I would take these steps and I would educate them this way. And maybe I'd ask them to go and spend 1 or 2 years working somewhere else, getting work experience before they came into the business, or getting specific training. And I'm a big believer it's probably very beneficial for people to go work somewhere else for 2 or 3 years before they come in. And there can be a pathway.
Sure.
And as a business owner, you can communicate to your employees, hey, you know what, it's about stability in the business, providing opportunities for every employee. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to train up my son or daughter, and they're going to kind of step in and work through these roles. And it's that transparency, because people really just want to know, hey, how's this going to affect me?
Right.
The person at the front desk is like, well, how does this new hire, how's this going to impact my life? Am I going to lose my job? But really they just want to make sure they have a good career and have a good job. And so providing that transparency. So it has to be very thoughtful.
So you said a couple of things there. One was just the communication to the other team members, employees, like here's the plan, so everyone kind of knows. But then you also mentioned you're a big fan of having somebody go get a job somewhere else for a year or 2 or 3. Why do you think that's important?
Well, for me, my experience was I had the opportunity to go to college, study business, came out, but no real life experience besides summer jobs, framing, things like that. And then went right to work for Wes, and then also our dad's company, but no outside experience. And so then you're in a very interesting dynamic where you're reporting to your sibling and your parent. Mm-hmm. It's your first management experience, your first employee experience. And I think it's beneficial to go work somewhere else and understand the difference between management as an employee and being managed as a adult child. And I think that's helpful. And because all parties have to be, I think, introspective enough and self-aware enough to be like, okay, what is going on here? This is a manager-employee relationship right now, we're having that, or is that a family relationship? And I think that's where it gets, I don't know what you think, Wes, but I think that's where it gets a little sticky.
Yeah, it can, but I like the word you used, introspective. So I think what can make it work well is whoever is bringing the child in, or if they really are introspective and they think about, they take themselves out of the business and look back in and go, okay, how is this working? And then they make sure that they're talking a lot with that child is coming into the business. So, and just kind of that way, okay, how is this working? This is kind of how I see things playing out. How are you feeling about things? What, if you have a lot of dialogue, then it short circuits a lot of issues that you can have. I think to Brooks's point about working outside the business, it's really most helpful to the kid, because then the kid can come into the business and they can say, hey, look, I've got some life experience. And so I'm not just here because of a blood relation. And I think that's important for the kid coming in. So my second business, that's what I did. I came in, I bought a business from my father-in-law, but I'd already had many decades being involved in another business, out in Seattle with Brooks. So when I stepped into that new role, I had instant credibility because of my prior business experience. So I think that was super helpful. So I would say whatever can be done in that regard is helpful for the kid. I think the other thing too, though, is to figure out a path that allows the kid who's coming in to figure out whether they really like the business or not. So sometimes kids feel absolutely like their arm is being twisted to come into the family business and take it over, because how the heck are mom and dad going to retire if you don't come into this business, son, and take it over, or daughter, and you got to make this go. And so there's a lot of family pressure sometimes. So I think that's a bad thing, because oftentimes that child comes in and they don't feel, they don't really love the business. They're not really that committed to it. They might be committed to their family, and that's why they're there, but they're not committed to the business. It doesn't spark it for them. So there has to be an easy way to talk about that frequently, and then also allow that child to exit if that's not the case. So from the child's standpoint, there's several things you can do to make that easier for them. But I think communicating to the employees what's going on is critical. So to give you an example, when we moved to Colorado and bought this, direct mail processing business. So I came in as 36, came in, bought the business. My father-in-law took me around and introduced me to everybody and says, "Hey, Wes is buying the business." Okay, great. Well, so that was kind of a surprise for a few people.
Yeah.
And some people are probably my age, right? They're my age. And as Brooks was talking about, they were looking at their career path. And I think one of them said, "Oh, I was thinking maybe I could have bought the business someday." And he was gone in about 3 months. He exited pretty quickly and he went and bought another business. So I think that's where more information, more communication with staff as to what your long-term goals around the business are. If it's always to pass it to a family member or have a family member buy it, whatever that transition is, but you want to keep it in the family, then you got to be pretty transparent about that with your folks.
Yeah, and I would echo kind of what you said about the whole confidence piece. I guess when you said you came out to Colorado to buy the direct mail business, you had all that outside experience and a lot of confidence. I would say, my entry into the business, my confidence was pretty low, just because I had a little bit of outside experience, but not much really. And so coming in, it was kind of like I had that feeling of I got to prove myself. And so I think that actually helped me on maybe the entitled front, because like, hey, I had started my own thing. You said, "Hey, why don't you just come over here and join me? We'll kind of figure this out together." So I had a little bit going for me, but not that much. But I think that pushed me to want to prove myself. But I'm curious if you guys have any specific thoughts around kind of that entitlement piece. Maybe somebody is, like me, where they're just coming into the business. They didn't get a lot of outside experience. They're just coming directly into the family business. Let's say you have communicated it to the employees, but how do you develop that, that younger leader, or that person that eventually could take over, without them kind of developing some of those tendencies of, "Oh, I got this opportunity because, my parents have worked hard and, now I'm just in it." Where do you go from there over those first few years to really build that person up?
I would start them at the bottom. I would definitely, but I would talk to them about what the path would be and say, "Hey, at any time you can exit this path. That's fine. But in order to really learn this business, you're going to come in, you can start here, you got to learn this part and this part and this part, and you're going to stay in each one of those sections until you've really learned it. And you're going to get paid what that position pays. So you're not going to be paid more. That creates problems, and you're not going to be paid less. So sometimes we feel like, oh, it's a family member, they should work for less. And that's wrong. That's totally wrong. And we've seen how that's played out sometimes in family businesses. Or you get the opposite, which is, oh, he's a family member, he gets additional perks. Like this position normally doesn't get a car, but Bob gets a car. And so all the other employees look at that, and all of a sudden there's discussions around that. So I think there has to be this very even-handed approach to handling that. But I'd start them at the bottom, just work them through all the positions. As they grow out of each position, move into the next one. But then always allow them to exit if it's not the right business for them. But they have to learn the business. And if you're saying, our ultimate goal is to have you take over and buy this, or whatever your exit plan is, but you can exit at any time. And if it doesn't work out, we have to have a good enough relationship where I can say, "Hey, you're not cutting it right now," or you can say, "I don't like the business and I want to exit." I don't know. What do you think, Brooks?
I would agree, and I think that it's a question of timing. And you think about our experience. We were able to early on in high school, you'd be able to build some foundations. But I didn't build 200.
Right.
I probably did 3, but I understood what a foundation was, and you could clear some lots. Well, I didn't clear lots for 10 years, but I cleared several, and you understood how equipment works and moving dirt and things like that. So it depends on the size of the business and depend on the opportunities. If there's 1,000 people in the business, that person might come in and learn different aspects, but the length of time they spend in each position, may be subject to how quickly you want to move them through the management training, as you move that person up and through. I mean,
yeah, you got to have a plan, right? I mean, if you don't have a plan, they could be in that position for 10 years and because the parent is going, oh, this is helpful to have him or in this position or her in this position.
And you have to, because they most likely that person, that adult child is going to be, hey, I'm doing this because I want to improve my financial position, improve my career. I'm not doing it so I can clean bathrooms.
Right.
Right. So that path that you've laid out, and that path you then are sharing with your employees and saying, hey, here's the path we're going to move them through. I'm going to need each one of you to help train this person because they're going to become the leader, which is going to make this enterprise continue and continue to provide jobs and work for everybody. And I'm being thoughtful and intentional about being a leader and an owner of the company. And people get on board. They understand not every employee wants to be an owner. Not every employee wants to be a manager. So it's as if you understand your employees and understand their personality profiles, then you can help them be the best they can be while you're setting up a good management transition plan and ownership transition plan.
Yeah, and I found too, just within our business, that just starting people at that entry level and then letting them work into those management positions, that's always, or leadership positions, has worked out the best. And versus trying to bring somebody in at, in jumping into a higher level. Just my personal experience, that has kind of bombed out. Whereas, if people are able to kind of get in and improve themselves, especially when it comes to leadership, because leadership, I feel like you're earning that. It's not given. You can be given a management title, but if people really look at you as a leader, you've got to kind of go through some fires together and, battle together a little bit. And so I think what you guys are saying is like, start that person at the bottom and work them through, even if, to your point, Brooks, they go on an accelerated path, maybe it's 3 months in each of these different divisions or 6 months or whatever it is. But they're at least learning it, seeing what it is, doing the work, and then moving on to that next position.
And I think, probably, Spencer, one of the reasons that things bomb out is, we never used to think about company culture, but now we think about it a lot. And I really think that helps define why people bomb out in a particular company and then are very successful in another company because of that culture fit. So to your point, I mean, if you come in and work in the business, you can see if there's a good culture fit. Even if it's a family member, they might not be a good culture fit. And so you need enough time to figure that out before you move them into a leadership position.
Yeah. And in thinking about some of your guys' experience, because you've been able to work under various leaders and then you've been in leadership positions, what are maybe some things that you've seen that people should avoid, either things that, you were working under somebody and it didn't go well, or, it wasn't resonating with you, or things that you did where you're going, oh man, that really didn't work. Brooks, is there anything coming to mind in terms of?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that idea of servant leadership as I don't think I even heard that term till I was 40. So I'm like, wow, if I had understood that when I was 21, and again, going back to educating yourself about being a leader, because understanding how to be a leader helps you understand also how to be a better employee, and because you can understand, okay, this leader is doing a good job or not doing a good job. What can I learn from that? You can always learn from every situation. So if you're working for somebody who's not a great leader, how can you be a better employee or to work for them and help them be a better manager, a better leader, even if they're not? And then you just tuck that away and you're like, well, when I'm in a position of leadership, then I'm as you get into these leadership roles, you've already formulated some of those concepts and you get to try it out. And most likely you're always going to be working with somebody, for somebody, or have someone working for you. So you can work on that servant leadership style as you work with anybody. You know, how can you be a better coworker? I mean, there's all sorts of opportunities to study that and work on that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Brooks. That you can lead from any position in the company. But in thinking about folks that I've worked for or leaders, to me, I think, and this is just my personal opinion, but I think a good leader is, they are not a negative person. So I think a good leader is neutral to positive, you know, at all times, even when they're faced with really tough situations. I think a good leader is has a good positive energy about them, and it could be high energy. It could be it doesn't have to be high energy, but it has to be this positive energy that people want to get behind and that they feel confident in. So I think a good leader does instill confidence. And that doesn't mean they have all the answers and they roll out with the perfect solution every time. They probably poll their people, they probably talk to them, they get input, and then they make decisions. You know, they go, hey, guess what? I've heard everything everyone has to say. We're going in this direction. Let's all get behind this and let's go. But I think folks that are super high and super low are very difficult to get behind as a leader. That's just my opinion.
Well, I agree, Wes. I mean, I went to Vistage as a CEO group, and they bring in talkers and talkers. They bring in speakers. They bring in
people that talk.
Yeah. People that do the talking. And I went to a couple, and there's the presenter, a guy by the name of Michael Olasso, who I just am a huge fan of. But his whole thing about leadership is that, you know, you're on stage, you know, all day, and you know, how do you interact as a human being with your spouse, your kids, your employees, other people. So you know, you have to, well, if you're having a bad day, then you better get your head together while you're driving to work or whatever, and before you get out of that car and you walk in that front door. And especially for those of us in the construction business, you know, you're driving around, you're checking jobs, you're going to meet with clients, you're meeting with vendors, you know, and if things are not going well, you need to, you know, put that away and be your best self every time. And that's super challenging. And I find that, and so, you know, you can't go out onto a job site and rip some guy six ways to Sunday because you're having a bad day. Mm-hmm. I am, you know, guilty of that, you know, when I was more emotionally immature. But you can't, you know, you have to be your best self because you know, other people are affected by your interactions. And so that goes back to Wes's point, which is you don't, as a leader, you don't get to have a bad day.
No. Yeah. And you are totally under the microscope.
Yep.
All the time. You may not think that people are watching you. They are watching you like a hawk. Just think, and if you've ever worked for somebody, you know, you really watched your boss and how is she feeling today? What's her mood as she walked in the office? Oh, should I steer clear for a little bit? Should, you know, what's going on? And so, I noticed, like my dog, you know, if you have a dog, you notice that your dog knows you better than you know yourself. Like if I walk by the closet and, you know, the dog knows exactly when I'm going to grab the leash or when I'm going to put on my shoes. He knows what times of days that I do different things. And that's the way we all are with the people that we report to. We really watch them carefully. So you got to be on your game all the time. If you're not on your game and you do fall off a little bit, you got to apologize. You got to make amends. You got to make it right. That doesn't mean that you can do that every day.
No, you can't.
Yeah.
You can't be doing that every day.
The apologies lose some value.
Right. There's no value if you.
I'm really sorry I yelled at you 5 times today.
Yeah. Well, Wes, one example that popped into my head is Brooks, you were talking, you said you don't get to have a bad day as a leader. And I remember in the early days of me joining the company, we'd have weekly management meetings. And so there were maybe, you know, 5 or 6 of us in there in the room, and I can't remember, I think we started the meeting this way, maybe we ended it, but you'd always go around the room and just say, like, how are you doing today? And it was a scale of 1 to 10, and you were always a 10, right? You know, and at first it was like, oh, he's a 10, and then I realized, what was going on there. But that, I think, speaks to your point, Brooks, of like, hey, you can't have a bad day. Like, hey, it's a good day. Like, bad stuff happens, but we're still approaching it with a 10 attitude or a 10 mindset. Like, we got to, keep moving forward and keep attacking. And that's, I think, just part of that, having that positive mindset, and then the other,
go ahead.
I was just going to say one more example that came to mind was, you said you're always kind of being watched, or people are watching like a hawk, and you go from being a husband or a dad or a boss or leader, whatever, all these different roles. And so I found that, like, I'll pull into my garage and you take a couple of deep breaths and you put your dad hat on, you're going in there with high energy. Same thing when you roll up to the office, you take a couple deep breaths and then you're going in there and you're putting that hat on. And you do have to wear those different hats, and you're the same person, but sometimes it requires different skills or different, attitudes or behaviors. But I think that, just as a simple little exercise, has really helped, because sometimes you'll end the day and something happened that didn't go right, and then you got to drive home, or you're picking somebody up and you got to switch gears immediately and kind of process those things later. So that's been helpful to me. But Brooks, you're going to jump in.
Well, that's just super. Yeah, one, it's very hard for me to do because I don't have a garage, so I'm suffering garage envy right now. So I pull up into my driveway.
Nice.
I have to get out of my car.
In the rainy.
Because you just have a bunch of bikes that have priority, right?
That's right. Yeah, exactly. I think that is one of the most challenging things as a human being, is to you're juggling all these multiple things. Whether you're whether you're a leader leading a huge company, a small company, or whether you're an employee working in a company and working towards a leadership role, is understanding that concept and being introspective to understand it. Yeah, you have to, if you're gonna have a bad day, or you're having a bad, work, understanding how you process that, and having, hopefully somebody you can talk to about that, because, you can't keep it bottled up inside. So, sometimes I'll, come home and I'll say to my wife, I say, I'm just going to ventilate for 5 minutes. I don't need you to do a thing. I just need to let this all go. And, you just let it all go. Because otherwise it might come out as you're going to yell at somebody, and, you're just looking, you've had, if something's gone so wrong, and you're just looking for somebody
where is this energy going to go?
Where's this energy going to go? And the sooner you can learn how to deal with that energy and to process it, however maybe you're an athlete and you run. Some people go out and they'll run it out, or they'll bike it out, or they'll do something. So it's how do you do it? Because if you're going to be a leader and you're supposed to be on all the time, that's not physically possible. So you have to find ways to process that.
Sometimes you just have to, I found that some mornings where it's bad, whatever it is, it's bad for whatever reason. And that's the other thing, I try not to hang on to any of that stuff. Right. So it's hard to remember exact examples, but you pull into the parking lot and it's not good. And you just sit there for a minute and then get your game face on and then go in. And when you hit the door, your game face is on. And that's what people need. They need you to do that. If you don't provide that for them, you are not being a leader. You are not giving them some reason to be there and to help you, with your problems and your issues in the business. So you got to give that to your folks, and it takes a lot out of you. And so, as Brooks was talking about, you got to figure out a way to recharge and get that game face back on for the next day. Whatever it is you have to do in the evening or in the morning, whether it's exercise or meditation or talking to your spouse or, whatever.
Yeah. A good buddy of mine, and through the whole recession from 08, 09, and we ran together, and I mean, kind of life-saving, because you can go out and run for 2 hours and you can just let all that go. And so he was having a lot of challenges in his business, and, we just back and forth, and that was a way for us to, and then it's all gone, and he didn't take my load, my burden, and I didn't take his burden. You left it all out on the road, and I miss that, because it's just sometimes, because there's somebody there you can just like let it go.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah,
that can help you be a better leader.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing from you guys is that, for those of you listening, find that outlet, because there's going to be challenges. There's just no avoiding that. And so find the outlet that allows you to put on that strong face and the game face, in those moments. And I thought it'd be fun to maybe think back to either a couple of leadership like stories where either you had a leader and you recognized that they were doing something that you thought was really cool, or something that you yourself implemented and you were pretty proud of. And I'll start with one, because I think these examples can be small or large, but in thinking about these things, I think it's good to recognize when you do them, because in the moment, sometimes it doesn't feel that great, even though it was the right thing to do. And like one thing that just popped into my head as you guys were talking was, I had to let somebody go on one particular occasion. And I remember standing in my office, literally saying, you got to walk in there. You got to walk in. I stood there for like 7 minutes, just trying to psych myself up and taking some deep breaths. But I knew it was the right decision, not only for, the team, the company, but for that individual too, because it wasn't creating a successful scenario for them and the rest of the team. And so, these decisions are the right things to do, but then you've got to actually execute and push through on those. So that was one thing that came to mind. Probably to some people, that's a super small example. They're like, oh, no big deal. That's, maybe they've had to let, numerous people go. I don't think it's ever fun, but you have to do that. So I don't know if anything comes to mind for you guys, Wes, as you think back either about leaders that you've had that you went, oh, that was a really good leadership moment, or things that you've executed on.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a really good question. And I was kind of just thinking about all your example there about having to let people go, which is really one of the hardest. It is probably the hardest thing to do as a leader in a business. But I guess as I was thinking about it and who I really looked up to in my business career, and it's a guy that I think mentored both me and Brooks, and it's a gentleman whose name was Jerry Curtis. And so Jerry Curtis was an engineer, and he was also an attorney, and he worked in construction, and he was a production manager. And very, very early on in my building career, I was very upset with a sub, and he just invited me into his office, and he said, there's a lot of hormones running around when you're your age. You just and obviously he had a good 25, 30 years on me. And he just kind of looked at me and said, so you just need to relax and it'll work itself out. I'm like, oh, okay. And it did, but then that always stuck with me. And that was early on. This was within the first year where I was really starting to build a lot of houses. And like, okay, well, I can just back off. I don't need to win every single battle. And there doesn't need to be a battle. And that's what I took away from it. But I always enjoyed Jerry's calm leadership and advice. And he was always there for me.
That's cool. Yeah.
No, Jerry's, and he, I spent a lot of time working with Jerry also. And just a super, World War II vet, injured in Italy, the Italian campaign. He was 18. And just super calm, cool, and so good from a leadership standpoint, teaching you how to lead in a calm, cool, collected way, and so very helpful with that training. So I had another person I worked under who was a little bit more volatile, and you could see that how he would interact with trades and employees, and a lot of people got blown up, and seeing how that worked or didn't work, and trying to adjust your style. I mean, one of the challenges is we, especially in construction businesses, small businesses, you learn on the job. There's not a huge, 24-month management training program. You can't afford it. Yeah. You just can't afford it. So what can you do as a small business, small family business, to train on the job and be intentional about training? I mean, it may be as much as you as a parent are employing one of your kids and you're learning how to be a leader and train that person to come up into the business. And there's just two people. That could be the start. And how can we as business owners do that intentionally and be a management, leadership trainer for other people?
Yeah. And it makes me think of, I just actually finished rereading Man's Search for Meaning, which if you haven't gone through that one.
That's on my book recommendation this week.
Oh, was it? Okay, sorry. Well, you can still
no, that's fine. That's great. Yeah.
But it came to mind because you were talking about, you guys both mentioned just kind of that calm, collected leadership style. And like one of the big themes from that book is you can't always control the outcome or what happens to you, but you can always control your emotions and how you react to it. And that really, I remember we had a leadership class in college and we read that book and that stuck with me. And so if you have this scenario that normally you'd want to blow up or you'd be angry, you just kind of collect yourself and realize that like yelling at somebody probably isn't going to make them feel good. And then moving forward, it doesn't help them moving forward. So it's kind of like drawing this line, like that already happened. We can't change that. So how can we move forward effectively? And usually that's not through yelling and anger. And, sure, sometimes there need to be repercussions or, hey, course correction, we need to do some extra training here, or hey, this really was not good. Here's what we're going to do to make sure that doesn't happen again. But you can deliver all that information in a calm way while still delivering, I think, the magnitude of it. And Wes, we'll get to some. Oh, you're holding something on the screen. For those
probably can't see that.
Yeah, for those of you listening,
yeah.
Go ahead, Wes.
So that's really what you just said made me think about that old equation. I don't know if you guys have heard that, but it's E plus R equals O, meaning we always control what happens because E is the event plus our reaction equals the outcome. So we always control the outcome. We can't control the E or the event. But since we can control our reaction, then we always control what happens. So I always kind of like that E plus R equals.
Yeah,
so
that's good. Yeah, and we're gonna wrap here in a minute. I want to get to your guys' book recommendations on leadership, but we're gonna start kind of a new segment as periodically as we get questions, but we'll call it the Builder Funnel Radio Listener Q&A. So we had a few questions coming in. One of them we've already tackled, which is what position should I start my kid in? And both of you guys were pretty in agreement there. Start at the bottom and move through. Timing can be fast or slow depending on the scenario. But we had a couple more. One of them was, what if my kids don't want to get involved in the business? Kind of what are options for transition? Let's make these a little more rapid fire questions since we're near the end of our segment here. Wes, why don't you?
Well, I guess, can you restate that, Spence?
Sure. So it's what if my kids don't want to get involved in the business? So we've been talking a lot about pulling kids in and moving them through and how to do that. But what if they don't? Kind of what are other transition options?
Well, I think, first, I would assume that your kids don't want to get in the business. I mean, I think that's a good place to start. Just assume that they don't. And then if they express an interest, if you talk to them and they're going, okay, then you can do that. But in terms of other transitions, I think you always want to go into the beginning with the end in mind, and whether that transition is to one of your children or to an outside party, you need to be thinking about that pretty early on in structuring your business to do that. So it could be, you got to figure out another exit strategy besides your kids. I mean, because chances are good that your kids are not going to want to come into the business, that they're going to do something else, and that's fine. That's cool. So start thinking about how you would transition the business to an outside party, or collect enough assets or reserves that you can eventually shut the business down and it's met your needs.
Yeah,
what do you think, I would agree. Yeah, you have to assume your kids would not be interested in the business, and don't burden them with that, and say, hey, you've got this business, you love it, and what are the opportunities to transition out? Either you have someone in the business who would want to acquire it, or you have an outside sale, which might be potential, and you have to be working on those as part of your whole strategy. Am I running this business just so I have something to do, and then when I'm done, I'm just, hanging up the tools and we're done with it? Or am I trying to create value for a sale? Is this business have the opportunity to be sold? Does it have an economic value? And I think that's almost an easier path than, let's bring the kids into the business and work. There's a lot more work in bringing kids into the business and transitioning to them than there is in just an outright sale.
Yeah.
Or a sale to someone working there.
And I think that's fair. Just if you've thought about your business at the front end, you go, hey, guess what? This business will not transition to the next generation. That's fair, because maybe you don't want to go through that process. So, but if that's what you're thinking, get that out there, let the kids know in case they were thinking that they were going to go into the business.
Yeah. I think those are good points. And the next question, we actually got to it, but I want to tweak it a little bit, because the question was, should my kids come straight out of school into the business or get another job first? I know you guys kind of said, yeah, go get another job first. Let's say there's a high level of interest. They already know, maybe they've done a couple of, they've scrapped some lots or done some things in a high school, and they're like, yes, I really want to get into the business. Same answer or a different answer? Brooks, we'll start with you. Would you still push them to get another job somewhere else first?
Okay. Absolutely. But with a plan, which is, maybe those conversations are happening in high school as you're talking to your kids, and maybe they're going to go right out of high school, right into the workforce, or they're going to go to trade school, or they're going to go to college, whatever that path is. It's those discussions about, hey, this is of interest to you, and this is a path that would work. If you have a responsibility as a parent, as a leader, as a business owner, to provide that pathway. And in this case, you're providing it for your child. So, you're doing double duty. You're providing a pathway for your child, and you're also providing a pathway as a manager and leader, into your, into the business. So that's what you have to think about. And I just think, and this really comes from my experience, which is I was, very inexperienced, came right into the construction business with no skills at all, and pretty emotionally immature. And if I had gone somewhere and worked somewhere maybe I should have worked somewhere for 20 years. I don't know, based on my maturity level. I would have been a better employee, and would have become a better leader quicker, because I would have worked somewhere, and, you kind of get you get a little bit of stuff knocked out of you working for somebody, and it's good to have somebody telling you what to do that's not your parent or not your sibling. Yeah. I think that comes from my experience, so I feel pretty strong.
Yeah, I think that's well said, Brooks. Yeah.
Fair enough. All right. Well, let's wrap with some book recommendations. So Wes, we'll start with you, but maybe, recommendations on leadership, either books that have impacted you personally or kind of, I don't know, top favorites in that category.
Well, I think it's kind of a tough question. There's so many books on leadership, but one that I thought was quite good is Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink and Leif. I forget Leif's last name.
Babin.
Okay, yeah, that's right. So Extreme Ownership, I'd recommend that one for sure. I think just this would be an odd recommendation, but How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. But if you're going to be a leader, you have to know how to get along with people, know how to connect with people. So I think that's an important book. Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. You go, well, that's not really a leadership book, but you have to know how to develop your habits so you can do the same things consistently, so you can provide that leadership example to your employees, and they know what to expect, and you can develop good habits and not necessarily bad habits. So those are my recommendations for today.
Cool.
That's
How about you, Brooks?
Yeah. I just brought one to, showing off with three. I always recommend for, especially people getting started, The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. Mm-hmm. How do we do it here? And that's about, that goes to the whole development of systems, but you just can't go wrong with that book and thinking about your business that way.
Yeah, that's a good one. And
how about you,
Wes, you stole mine as well, so I'll think of another. But Extreme Ownership, really, because I mean, the big concept from that is that you have to own the, you know, the outcome and the response. You have to take responsibility, but not just, you know, it's everybody. So whether you're leading as an employee, or you're leading in an entry-level position, or as the top guy, like if you take responsibility and ownership for whatever happened, if everyone approaches it that way, then you start working towards solutions. But especially as the top guy, recognizing that, hey, if something went wrong, it's because you didn't have a good enough system, you didn't provide the training, and so versus blaming. And so I think that just is super powerful. But I'll toss in his other one, which is Dichotomy of Leadership, which is same by Jocko. And that one, he basically talks about how leadership is pretty much the hardest job in the world, because you have all these categories and scenarios of things that happen. And it's not like you're always on one extreme or you're always on the other extreme. Sometimes you're on one, sometimes you're on the other, but most of the time you're kind of tugging somewhere in the middle, you know, so you're trying to be stern, but not aggressive, but you're not trying to be too soft, you know, so it's like, it's very much an art, and knowing situationally when to, you know, be either a little more to one side or the other, or right in the middle. And so I like that one is a really good one as well. But yeah, you guys got any final thoughts on leadership as we wrap for today?
Man, I don't know. I think we've ventilated the subject, at least from our perspective, or my perspective.
Yeah, my only thought is just always remembering trying to be the best, you know, the best leader you can be every day, all day, because, you know, you're on and people are watching what you do.
Yeah, it's good advice. Well, and thank you guys for listening and tuning in. We hope that this one at least triggered some new ideas, some new thoughts, especially, you know, with bringing in the next generation of the business, thinking about how to bring them in a thoughtful, strategic way. And if you guys got some value, got a new idea out of the show, we'd really appreciate a review over on iTunes. That helps us spread the word. And we will see you next week here on Building a Family Business on Builder Funnel Radio.